Hello everyone and welcome to the final episode of my favourite mobile suit designs from Gundam Universe. And we're finally here. Lots of people have heard me say this over and over and over again, but yeah, we've got to the God Gundam, or the Burning Gundam if you want to go off the US translation. So, we'll start with this thing. Let's go over how it's handled first. So it's a mobile fighter, not specifically a mobile suit. The only difference with that is the way that it's controlled. In mobile suits, you have the standard controls in a cockpit, which are normally like 2 joysticks or whatever and some pedals, normally in a heads-up display. Maybe a couple of buttons here and there, but mobile fighters are handled differently. Essentially, the cockpit is a small open space, as it were, where the fighters can move around freely and perform martial arts moves without hitting the walls of it. And as a result, what happens is, when the pilot is wearing a special fight suit inside the cockpit and performs attacks or movements, the mobile suit traces those and performs them highly accurately. It's almost like an extension of the fighter themselves. So, that's the distinction between the two. A mobile suit is handled traditionally, like most giant robots, and a mobile fighter is more human-like. And no, that's just the tip of the G Gundam universe in terms of how things have changed. I always say that G Gundam is my favourite series because of how absurd it is and how crazy it gets. And yeah, this gets good. So, the way that the God Gundam is handled to the end of the series is completely different from the Shining Gundam, and to give context, we'll go over the Shining Gundam as well. So the Shining Gundam was Neo Japan's entry into, I think, the 13th tournament. The idea is that the world countries or colonies that floating around in space hold tournaments, fighting tournaments, with each representative from a country fighting to the death, more or less, or to beat everybody else. And whoever wins becomes leader of space or ruler of space for however long it is until the next championship or tournament. So, the Shining Gundam was entered into the 13th tournament, and the idea was that it would use the pilot Domon Kashu's rage to give it its power. The idea is that both the God Gundam and the Shining Gundam have super modes or hyper modes. Essentially, it's just a performance enhancer that happens when the suit's limiters or power limiters are taken off, and the suit transforms slightly to sort of visually show that the limiters have come off, and then as a result it can perform more devastating attacks, it can go faster, basically it can just perform better. But the Shining Gundam, the difference between it and the God Gundam, apart from a little bit of performance tweaks, is that the Shining Gundam used Domon's rage mostly. In the first half of G Gundam, it's about Domon hunting down his brother, who he thinks is responsible for a lot of problems that he runs into, whether it be his dad being arrested, and his mother being ill, if I remember rightly. It's all his brother Kyoji's fault, and so he takes the Shining Gundam to hunt him down, and as a result, anyone that gets in his way suffers his rage, and ends up getting one-shotted normally. The Shining Gundam's signature weapon is its Shining Finger, where a lot of energy is pumped into the Shining Gundam's hand and then is put into enemy Gundam's head units normally, because it one-shots them. The amount of energy produced more or less just blows the entire head off the enemy unit up, resulting in it being able to win quite a lot of fights really easily, provided it can just get in and take the enemy by surprise. So, the God Gundam then. If the Shining Gundam can one-shot everything, provided it can land some hits, what is the God Gundam like? Well, the God Gundam comes in just before the second half of G Gundam, and this is when Domon has lost the Shining Gundam, it's been destroyed, or heavily damaged, and Over the course of the series, Domon has built up feelings for his partner, Rain. And this is where things start to change. The God Gundam, instead of being powered so much by Domon's rage, is powered by Domon's feelings for Rain. And as a result, he's slowly learning what's more important to him. He enjoys fighting, yeah, but he's slowly learning that, yeah, he has these feelings for his assistant, and that she's been there all the time supporting him. And by the end, he realizes that, he's just been an idiot, he's been pig-headed, he's not noticed any of this, and he's only just realized what's going on. So by the end, this thing is it's pretty cheesy in terms of a love story, but it's a traditional love story. It's pretty cool. But yeah, the God Gundam is more or less powered by Domon's feelings for Rain most of the time. The rest of it is little bit outbursts of anger and stuff, but mainly it's his inner calmness and Rain supporting him. So, the difference then is that its power output is increased more than the Shining Gundams. As a result, it can do what it calls the God Finger, where it's still basically an insta-kill weapon. It's just extremely more powerful. It can fire energy blasts that are more or less like Hadoukens from Street Fighter at pretty decent distance. It's got Vulcans on its shoulders, on its head. If I remember rightly, it's got 4 Vulcans on its head, and then a set of Vulcans in its shoulders, giving it its only real other ranged weapon. It's, I think, twice as fast, if I remember rightly. And again, like the Shining Gundam, it can go into its hyper mode, or its super mode, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the suit's power limiter turns off, and it goes gold. Almost like turning Super Saiyan. But, yeah, as a result, its power increases, its speed increases, and it can do some really wacky stuff. Now, that's only the bare basics of G Gundam. Never mind the fact that at the very end of it, Domon rides out of a giant, almost, you would say, colony-sized Devil Gundam on a horse. A robot horse. But yeah, that's not the end of it. So, the moves that it has are pretty ridiculous. You have the Sekiha Tenkyoken, which is this overall devastating attack, which is, like I said before, it's more or less like the giant fireball that he throws. Then you have the King of Hearts version, where it's the same thing, but the King of Hearts is actual crest that he gets partway through the second half of G Gundam, which cements him as one of the most powerful fighters. The King of Hearts emblem, or crest, is displayed on the front of the attack, which is pretty crazy. Then you have the final finishing move, which is the Love Sekiha Tenkyoken, which is Domon and Rain's combination move, which instead of punching just a giant hole in enemy mobile suits, instead punches a nice, sort of medium-sized love heart-looking hole in mobile suits. Again, it's pretty cheesy, but considering it one-shots the most powerful thing in the series, it's cheesy, but it's powerful. Domon also has a lot of traditional martial arts skills. It's got 2 beam sabers. At one point, outside of his mobile suit, Domon can kick up a building, if I remember rightly, or at least punches one to destroy it. So, yeah, he's pretty strong without the suit. But yeah, you've got Heat End, which is where Domon will lift a suit normally above the God Gundam, and then pump all of its energy into its hand, causing the other mobile suit to explode from the inside. Normally you don't go for the cockpit with any of these moves, but towards the end of the show, bearing in mind there are a lot of the enemy suits are contaminated by DG cells, or Devil Gundam cells. At this point, this is where he's using Heat End on certain mobile suits to finish them off and make sure they don't come back. Heat End also can be a somewhat safe attack. If I remember rightly, he uses it on the Zeus Gundam in the start of the second half of the series, where the God Gundam takes part in the opening rounds of the tournament properly after training and ends up destroying the Zeus Gundam completely, leaving just the pilot. So it's possible that there are different amounts of energy that can be toggled or tweaked to emit from the God Hand or God Finger so that it can leave the pilot safe, as it were, but destroy everything else. This thing also has a ridiculous amount of head cameras. It has 2 on the front. If you class its eyes, it has 4, and then it's got a rear head camera as well, which is pretty cool. It's got an energy emitter in the front of its chest, which is the thing that emits the King of Hearts crest as well. The backpack can separate and become a core lander. It's basically like a mobile fighter, but instead of having to separate the mobile suit in half, you just eject from the back. I think design-wise, that's a lot better, because then you're not having to sort of scramble like 2 parts of a Gundam in half to get out of there, or trying to purge it. Instead, you can just quickly zip away. But yeah, I like the God Gundam, not because of its different style of handling, or the fact that it is ridiculously overpowered for its series, or the fact that, yeah, it has some really cheesy moments. I like it because of how it looks. Like, everything else is just the icing on top of the cake, as it were. But let's go over the looks of the God Gundam. So, the standard red, blue, and yellow affair is the colour scheme. It's kind of traditional, but it's accented in certain areas. You still have the red at the bottom of the feet, but you have slightly more venting. The legs don't look as blocky. They're a little bit more slender, a little bit more organic. Waist skirts. So, the waist skirts, the front of them is red, but has no Earth Federation logo on like other mobile suits from Gundam earlier on anyway, because this takes place in, I think it's Future Century. Then the front skirts themselves are a bit of white, a bit of blue, just to kind of make the colour separation break up a little bit, so it's got a little bit more colour in it. If I remember rightly, the rear skirt is blue as well, making the legs kind of a nice mix of colours. The torso is a mixture of red and blue primarily, with a little bit of white accenting it. The vents on both sides and the top of the energy emitter canopy are gold, as well as the Vulcans. Just these little details that allow the colours to pop, and they work really well with each other. The head is primarily white, with the only bits being red being mainly around the eyes and the goatee area or the chin. And then the rest, the head cameras are this like teal or green, and then you've got the double V fin, which just makes it a little bit better than the usual design, you know, because what's better than having one V fin? We'll just stick another one on there for the sake of it. One behind the other, slightly staggered. The traditional like V shape that the V fin, almost like a jewel that sits on top of the head and the V goes into, that's normally coloured red. On this instead is further down at the front of the lower head camera and is white. The backpack is a mixture mainly of blue for the main body of it, so it makes it look as if it's part of the main body of the Gundam. But then the thruster bells are grey, or like a gunmetal of sorts. And then the rest of it is red and white again to accent it, give it that nice colour. All of this works in conjunction, breaks it all up. The shoulders are red to make sure that there's not too much white on there again. Going down the arm, it's white again primarily, and then when we get to the bottom of the arm, we get the what I would say is one of the more coolest things to spot on a Gundam. I think this was the first time this happened as well. Some people can correct me in the comments, but it has a gauntlet that goes over the God Hand, which also has some claws on the back of it that allow it to grip onto mobile suits and also allow it to kind of protect the actual God Hand weapon itself, because its actual fist is a weapon. It's kind of it looks aggressive, but at the same time, it looks really cool. Just the way that it slides over and the claws open up. It looks really nice. And when you see it in action in the show, you just think, yeah, I don't want to be on the other end of that, because it's nasty looking. But yeah, I do like the way the armor looks on it. I like the way that the color scheme all works together. It's pretty uniform and it complements each other nicely. And then at the end, you've obviously got the hyper mode and the other standout feature, which is the energy halo that appears around the back of it when it's emitting massive amounts of energy. Overall, the looks of the suit just kill it for me. Like, if the primary Gundam, the RX-78, the original one, was a very boxy design, but I feel like if you took the RX-78, give it a little bit more colour and a little bit more flair in terms of its design here and there, and made it look a little bit more organic or a little bit streamlined and less boxy, then the God Gundam is what you would get. That's what I believe, primarily because it just looks very similar, just very refined. All of its lines are nice and clean. Its angles aren't too boxy. It's a thing all on its own, and it stands out amongst all the other mobile suit designs for me, and that's why I like it. Everything else, its ridiculous moves, the way that it fits into the story, everything else is just the cherry on top or the icing on the cake for me, whichever you want to choose there. All I know is the suit looks fantastic, and it's a really good package overall, and yeah, I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. Leave your comments down below. I'll see you on the next one, and next time we'll be going over a different subject. So, until then, and until I figure out what I'm going to cover, bye!